My wife told me she wasn't expecting me for Christmas, so I sold her share in the company I built from nothing. Not out of anger. Not out of spite. Just truth, sharpened into consequence. If you like true stories that hit the heart and make you rethink loyalty, subscribe, because here's exactly how it happened. I wasn't planning on teaching a lesson that winter. I was planning on wrapping gifts, decorating the old tree, and watching the snow fall the way my wife used to love. I thought Christmas was still ours. I thought we were still us. After 40 years of marriage, you don't imagine the holidays without the person you built a life beside. But one phone call changed everything. One sentence I never expected to hear. She said it so casually, as if she were telling me the weather. "We're doing Christmas without you this year. It's just, better that way." The silence afterward felt colder than December. And that was the moment I realized, love can rot quietly. And when it does, even the holidays can turn into a funeral. That's when I decided I wasn't going to be erased. Not from my marriage, and not from my own company. The morning it all began was the kind that used to make me believe the world still loved me back. Outside, the snowfall was light, soft flakes drifting like white feathers, settling gently on the pines that lined my driveway. The house was quiet, except for the faint hum of Nat King Cole playing on the old record player my wife bought during our first year of marriage. The same one that used to make her dance barefoot in the kitchen while I pretended not to stumble over my own 2 feet. I was in the living room, wrapping a gift I had spent weeks planning. A simple wooden jewelry box, carved by hand, polished until it gleamed like honey in the light. Inside, I'd tucked a small letter, nothing dramatic, just a promise to take her traveling in the new year, to the places we always talked about but never saw. Italy. Vienna. The coast of Portugal. Our kids were grown, our business was stable, and for the first time in decades, life felt settled. It was supposed to be the first Christmas we weren't drowning in work or bills or emergencies. Just us, older, quieter, grateful. I stood back and looked at the wrapped box. My fingers ached from the cold that settled in my joints these days, but it felt like the ache of purpose. 66 is an age where most men feel invisible. But wrapping that gift, thinking of her opening it, I didn't feel old. I felt like a husband. A man with something to give. The house smelled of pine. Our tree stood in the corner, decorated with ornaments that carried 40 years of memories, tiny fingerprints from when our sons were toddlers, a star that kept tilting no matter how many times I fixed it, and a faded paper angel our daughter made in 2nd grade. My wife always said Christmas wasn't about gifts, but about warmth. Tradition. Family. Family. The word still meant something to me. I set the gift beneath the tree, next to another box she'd never seen. That one was smaller. Older. A velvet ring box. It held my wedding band from our 20th anniversary renewal, the one she always swore was her favorite moment in our life together. I planned to give it back to her as a symbol, we're still choosing each other. Sentimental, I know. But I'm a sentimental man. As I poured myself coffee, I thought of the early years, when we shared one coat during winter, when we worked 12-hour shifts to keep the business alive, when we would sit in a tiny apartment and dream about the home we have now. We survived near bankruptcy, sickness, nights we were too tired to eat, and mornings that came too soon. She'd been my partner through all of it. My teammate. My friend. Or at least, I believed she was. That morning, I felt lucky. Blessed. I was a man with a home, a company I built from the dust of my own failures, and a wife I still loved after 4 decades. I didn't know the ground beneath me was already cracking. I didn't know the holiday I cherished was about to become the day I buried my marriage. All I knew was the warmth of that quiet house, the glow of the fire reflecting off the ornaments, and the feeling that, after everything, we had finally made it to the gentle part of life. If I had known what was coming, I would have held on to that morning a little longer. Because peace, I learned, is often just the pause before the storm. Around midday, I decided to drive into town. I wanted the table to feel special: roasted ham, her favorite cranberry chutney, and that ridiculous peppermint cheesecake she loved so much. I wasn't much of a baker, but for her, I tried. 40 years teaches a man to learn what keeps a heart warm. The streets were lined with lights and Christmas wreaths. Kids in bright hats threw snowballs by the bakery. I remember thinking, this is what Christmas should feel like: ordinary, gentle, full of small joys. I had bags of groceries stacked in the passenger seat when my phone buzzed. Her name lit up the screen. For a moment, I felt like a teenager again, stupid, excited, hoping she'd say she was coming home early. I answered with a smile in my voice. "Hey, sweetheart. Tell me you're hungry, because I'm cooking enough to feed an army." There was a pause. Not static. Not noise. The kind of pause that only comes when someone is rehearsing a sentence that breaks something. "Richard," she said quietly, "we need to talk." I laughed softly. That's never a good start. "What's wrong?" She inhaled. A small, sharp breath. "About Christmas." My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. "What about it?" "I think it might be better if you didn't come this year." The light turned green, but I didn't move. Cars honked behind me, but they sounded far away, like they were happening in a different reality. "Did I hear you right?" My voice barely came out. Her tone stayed flat, practiced. "My family is having a small dinner. Very intimate. They're keeping it simple. And, well, they aren't expecting you." "They aren't expecting you." "Not I'm not expecting you. Not I don't want you." She had already separated herself from the decision, pushing the blame onto anyone else she could use as a shield. "I'm your husband," I whispered. "Why wouldn't I be there?" She hesitated, and when she spoke, every word cut clean. "You know how you can be, Richard. Loud. Traditional. You turn everything sentimental. They prefer something refined. Loud. Too sentimental. Not refined." After 40 years together, I had just been described like an uncultured inconvenience. I pulled the car over and stared through the windshield as snowflakes tapped against the glass. "So that's it?" I asked. "You just don't want me there?" "It's just easier this way," she said. "We can celebrate after. Maybe New Year's. You understand." I didn't. Not then. But I knew begging for a place at my own Christmas table would turn me into something smaller than a man. So I swallowed the humiliation, even though it burned like acid. "Sure," I said. "If that's what you want." She sounded relieved. "Thank you. I knew you'd be reasonable. Merry Christmas, Richard." She hung up first. I sat in the silence, groceries going cold in the seat beside me. Outside, families walked down sidewalks with gifts in their arms, smiling, laughing, living the kind of holiday I had somehow lost without realizing it. I didn't cry. Men my age don't cry. We just break quietly, the way old wood splits under winter. I drove home without turning on the radio. No music. No thoughts. Just the repeated sting of her words echoing in my chest. "They aren't expecting you." When I stepped back into the house, the tree lights blinked cheerfully, unaware that something inside the room had died. And that was the moment I understood, Christmas wasn't the wound. It was the announcement of a betrayal that had already happened. I put the groceries away one item at a time, not because they belonged in the fridge, but because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. The house felt too big, every room echoing with a kind of loneliness that didn't exist the day before. I stood by the window and watched the snow sink into the lawn, remembering winters that felt warmer, even when the world outside was frozen. The truth is, my wife wasn't always like this. There was a time she would have laughed at the idea of a Christmas without us together. We met when we were 24, Two broke kids with impossible dreams and no idea how hard the world could be. She worked at a coffee shop. I was hauling lumber for a construction crew, coming home every night smelling like concrete and sweat. She didn't care about any of that. She loved me when all I owned fit in the back seat of a rusted Buick. She'd sit beside me on cold nights, wrapped in a borrowed blanket, telling me I was going to build something great one day. She believed in me before I believed in myself. We married in a courthouse with one witness, because neither of us could afford a wedding. Our first apartment was so small the kitchen and living room were the same space. We had one pot, 2 plates, and a mattress on the floor. But we had each other. Back then, that felt like enough. The business didn't come easy. I spent years working in garages, fixing machines by hand, making just enough money to keep the lights on. She was there for all of it, bringing me lunch, helping me organize receipts, staying up late to listen to me dream about turning a hobby into a company. I never forgot those days. I never forgot that part of her. When the company finally started growing, it felt like a miracle. I hired my first employee. Then 3. Then 10. We moved into a real building. Contracts got bigger. Profits climbed. I remember the night I told her we'd made our first $1 million in revenue. She cried, not because of the money, but because she said she knew I'd make it. Back then, it still felt like our success. So when the accountant suggested putting part of the company in her name for tax benefits, I didn't hesitate. I could have given her 5% or 10%. Instead, I gave her 30%. No strings. No requirements. I signed the papers with a smile because she was my wife, my partner, the person who stood beside me when we had nothing. But success has a way of changing people. She started caring about appearances, the right clothes, the right charity events, the right friends. Eventually, she wanted the right husband. Not the one who built the company, but the polished version she wished I'd become. We stopped eating dinner together. She traveled with friends more than she stayed home. Our conversations turned into one-sided updates, where she was going, who she was seeing, which gala she needed a dress for. I kept telling myself it was a phase. Marriages go through seasons. People drift, then come back. I didn't realize she had quietly drifted so far that she couldn't see who we used to be. I walked into my office and opened an old filing cabinet. Inside were photos, our first storefront, her cutting the ribbon, both of us grinning like fools. Another photo of her sitting on a workbench eating takeout with me at midnight. Hair messy. Face tired. Happy. She used to love the man covered in sawdust and ambition. Eventually, she grew ashamed of him. I placed the photos back inside and shut the drawer. You don't wake up one morning and lose a marriage. It happens a drop at a time. A missed dinner here. A quiet insult there. A forgotten promise, a cancelled tradition. And then suddenly someone tells you they don't want you at Christmas, and you realize the home you built together has been empty for a long time. But that day, after the phone call, something inside me changed. Not anger. Not hate. A cold kind of clarity. The kind you get when you stop begging to be seen. When the woman you gave your life to says you're not welcome, you start remembering everything you gave up just to make her world comfortable. The sacrifices you never spoke about. The years you traded. The pieces of yourself you lost. I looked at the tree, the wrapped gifts, the decorations I had put up alone, and I knew the truth I had been avoiding for years. She didn't fall out of love with me. She outgrew the man she used to need. And now that she had her life polished and perfect, she no longer cared whether I was in the picture. That was the night the past finally collapsed. The night I stopped being a husband begging for space in his own home, and became a man who remembered what he built, and who he built it for. Because if I was no longer part of her future, then she was no longer entitled to what I built from my past. 2 nights after that phone call, I couldn't sit still. The house felt like a museum, silent, cold, full of memories that stared back at me like ghosts. I told myself I'd stay home, drink a little whiskey, and let Christmas pass like a bad dream. But when evening came, a thought gnawed at me. What if she changed her mind? What if she missed me too? What if this was just a terrible misunderstanding? Hope makes fools of men who should know better. I grabbed my coat, scraped snow off the windshield, and drove across town. Along the way, I rehearsed what I might say, nothing dramatic, just a simple, "I'm here if you want me." After 4 decades of marriage, you don't give up because of one painful sentence. Her sister lived in a quiet, wealthy neighborhood, gated driveways, trimmed hedges, houses that looked copied from magazines. I parked down the street, not wanting to look like I'd come to make a scene. I walked toward the house, gift bag in hand, heart pounding like a nervous teenager. The windows glowed with warm yellow light. Laughter spilled out into the cold night. For a moment, I felt relief. Maybe there was still a place for me at the table. I stepped closer, reached the porch, and raised my hand to knock, when I heard my wife's voice on the other side of the door. Clear. Sharp. Careless. I just needed a break from him. It's embarrassing. He's so old-fashioned. Every year, the same sentimental nonsense. I can't do it anymore. Someone laughed. Not a nervous laugh, a mocking one. Another voice chimed in, female, smug. Well, you're beyond that life now. You're not pinned to some small-town man with dusty work boots. My chest tightened. Dusty work boots. That's what I'd become, a costume she was ashamed to be seen with. My wife added, this Christmas feels like freedom. No emotional speeches. No surprises. Just elegance, peace, and real company. The words didn't stab, they crushed. Real company. As if I was an imaginary partner she'd tolerated out of habit. I stood frozen, listening to the people who once hugged me at holidays dissect my life like it was a stain on her dress. Do you think he'll show up? Someone asked. She laughed, light, dismissive, confident. He wouldn't dare. He knows his place. His place. That was the moment something inside me split clean in half. I wasn't a husband to her anymore. I was a prop from a life she outgrew. A living relic from the years she'd never admit she came from. I didn't knock. I didn't leave the gift. I stepped back onto the snow-covered sidewalk and walked away. My legs felt hollow, but my mind had never been clearer. On the drive home, the streets blurred. Houses glowed with decorations, couples held hands, kids dragged sleds up hills. Holidays everywhere. And somehow, I was living inside a tragedy no one else could see. When I reached the house, I set the gift bag on the table and poured myself a drink. The whiskey burned, but not as much as her voice replaying in my head. This Christmas feels like freedom. Freedom from me. I sat in the quiet until the clock read past midnight, staring at the business documents pinned on my office wall. Contracts. Ownership certificates. Shared distributions. Her name was on 30% of everything I built. Not because she earned it in the company. Because I loved her. I had given her part of my life's work, my sweat, my years, my sleepless nights, just to make her feel secure. And now she stood in a room full of polished strangers, mocking the same man who carved her future out of nothing. Anger didn't fill me. Something colder did, clarity. For 40 years, she leaned on the man she now saw as a burden. And if I stayed silent, she would live off the company long after she was done with me. Her share would buy vacations, dresses, social circles, a polished life she never would have tasted without me. That's when the decision formed, not loud, not dramatic, just steady and final. If she didn't want to be part of my life, she wouldn't be part of my legacy. In the corner of my office sat an old safe, scratched and heavy. I spun the dial, opened the steel door, and pulled out the original shareholder agreement, the one that said her shares were transferable only with my written approval. I read it 3 times, just to be sure. Then I whispered to the empty room. You wanted freedom. You'll have it. By morning, I wasn't a heartbroken husband anymore. I was the man who built the company. And I was done building for someone who treated me like the dirt beneath her heels. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my office desk with a pen in my hand and the shareholder agreement laid flat in front of me. 30%. I had given her 30% of the company back when love meant trusting blindly. Back when I believed marriage was the safest place a man's heart could rest. The agreement was written during our most hopeful years. We put her name on it because the accountant said it would protect our assets. I agreed because I didn't know I was signing a future where she would treat the company like a luxury purse, something to flaunt, not something earned. The contract was simple. I retained full control. Shares were non-voting. Profits could be distributed at my discretion. Transfers required my approval alone. She had access to wealth, but no power. Just as she wanted, a life of comfort without responsibility. She never stepped into the office. Never learned a single system. Never even knew the names of the men and women who kept the company alive. To the world, she was the successful founder's wife. That was enough for her. But the contract didn't just protect the business. It protected me. Because her shares, her precious 30%, could be sold to someone else without her consent. So before the sun came up, before she even woke from the bed we no longer shared, I called my attorney, Marcus. He'd known me since the first years of the business, back when all I had was a rented workshop and a bank balance that could be written on a sticky note. He answered on the second ring, voice groggy. Richard? It's Christmas Eve. Everything okay? No, I said. I need to initiate a transfer of shares. He sat up. I could hear the sheets shift. Your wife's shares? Yes. He didn't ask why. Lawyers learn to wait until emotion stops choking facts. Do you want me to send the standard purchase agreement? No. I want a direct sale. Full transfer. No residual rights. There was a pause. That's final. It's overdue. Half an hour later, I was in his office, signing paperwork while cleaning crews mopped the hallway and a receptionist decorated a plastic tree with cheap tinsel. Most people were at home wrapping gifts or baking cookies. I was dismantling a marriage one legal clause at a time. Marcus drafted the sale authorization. I chose a private buyer, a silent partner who had been waiting years for more stake in the company. Someone stable. Professional. Someone who valued the business more than the woman who mocked the man who built it. We reviewed the terms twice. No profit share. No distributions. No claim on future earnings. Once the sale went through, my wife would wake up financially independent of me, not a co-owner, not a beneficiary, not a partner. Just a spectator. When do you want to finalize? Marcus asked. Today. He raised an eyebrow. On Christmas Eve? That's cold. I shook my head. Cold was the moment she told a room full of people that life was better without me. He didn't argue. Instead, he handed me the documents and slid a pen across the table. My signature looked steady, even though my heart shook. The transaction was wired, notarized, and confirmed electronically in less than 2 hours. By lunchtime, her shares were gone. Not frozen. Not held. Sold. Liquidated. 30% of the company, an empire I built while she slept comfortably, now belonged to someone who actually respected it. That afternoon, I drove to the office. Most employees were already gone for the holidays, but the lights were still on. I walked through the halls, past the framed awards, the old photographs of our first groundbreaking, the newspaper clippings that celebrated our rise. Success isn't a moment. It's 1,000 nights spent working when everyone else is sleeping. She never understood that part. In the boardroom, I pulled out the new ownership ledger and replaced her name with the buyer's. The act felt strangely like breathing again, like I'd been underwater for years without noticing. The company felt lighter. I felt lighter. By evening, I sat alone in the conference room, staring at the city lights glowing beneath a winter sky. Snow dusted the streets below, coating the world in quiet white. For the first time in years, I didn't feel trapped in a marriage that suffocated me. I felt free. But freedom always comes with an aftershock. The next morning, Christmas morning, she called. I expected anger. But her voice was drenched in holiday charm, the tone she used when she wanted something. "Merry Christmas," she said. "You didn't show up last night. Everyone asked about you." The hypocrisy nearly made me laugh. "Did they?" I asked. "Yes. My sister said it was strange without you. It felt incomplete." She spoke as if she had spent the evening crying instead of celebrating my absence. I didn't argue. I had things to take care of. "Well, I'm heading to brunch," she continued. "I might stop by later. We should talk." "We will," I said. "But first, check your email." She didn't respond. I imagined her sitting at a polished dining table, phone in one hand, fork in the other, trying to maintain elegance while her world cracked open. 5 minutes later, she called back. "What is this?" Her voice had lost every trace of silk. "It's a transfer," I said. "Your shares have been sold." "You can't do that." "I did." "You had no right. The contract says otherwise." Her breathing turned sharp, ragged. I could picture her eyes narrowing, face paling, composure slipping away like a mask sliding off. "You're destroying my life," she hissed. "No," I replied. "I'm removing myself from it." Her voice broke, anger tangled with panic. "You ruined Christmas." "No," I said. "You ruined our marriage." "I'm just cleaning up the paperwork." She hung up on me. This time, I didn't feel even a tremor in my chest. That night, when the house was quiet again, I sat by the fire with a cup of coffee and watched the flames dance. I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel cruel. I felt honest, maybe for the first time in years. She wanted a life where I didn't exist. So I gave it to her, legally, permanently, irrevocably. And the price of that freedom was 30% of a company she never helped build. She came home the next morning. Not quietly. The front door flew open, slammed against the wall, and her heels struck the floor like bullets. She walked into the kitchen where I was drinking coffee, snow melting on her coat, cheeks flushed with fury. "What did you do?" she demanded. "No, hello, no, Merry Christmas. Just war." "I followed the contract," I said. "The same one we signed together." "You blindsided me." Her voice cracked. "I woke up and I wasn't a shareholder anymore. No warning. No conversation." "You didn't warn me when you erased me from Christmas," I replied. "You made decisions without me." I returned the favor. She paced in front of the window, hands trembling, not with sadness, but with rage born from entitlement. "That company is mine too." "No," I said. "You held shares. That's not ownership. That's privilege." Her eyes narrowed. "You're being dramatic. It was one holiday. My family thought." "Don't lie," I cut in. "I heard what you said at your sister's house." Her mouth fell open. "You were there." "I heard every word. How life is easier without me. How you're embarrassed by me. How I'm sentimental. Old-fashioned. Loud." A flicker of guilt crossed her face, but it vanished just as quickly as it came. She lifted her chin. You didn't understand the context. There it was. The refuge of cowards, context. I understood perfectly, I said. You weren't talking to a therapist. You weren't confiding out of pain. You were performing. You wanted to prove you'd outgrown me. She folded her arms. You're overreacting. I never asked for this. I never asked you to sell anything. No, I said. You asked for freedom. I just gave you the financial version. She stopped pacing and stared at me, eyes cold, calculating. You humiliated me. My sister knows. My friends know. Everyone is asking questions. That must be uncomfortable, I said. Welcome to my world. She slammed her palm onto the counter. Don't play saint. You did this to hurt me. I did this to protect myself. You wanted a life where you could treat me like decoration and still enjoy the rewards of my work. I'm done funding your disrespect. Her lip quivered, but not from sorrow. From frustration. She was losing control, and she wasn't used to that. Years of social climbing had given her confidence that she would always land on her feet. Now she was falling, and the ground was rushing up fast. You think people will side with you, she snapped. A husband who sells his wife's steak behind her back. They'll call you bitter. Cruel. Senile. People don't know what happens behind closed doors, I said. And I don't need anyone to side with me. The documents stand on their own. She went quiet, thinking. Not about the marriage. About the money. I can challenge the sale, she whispered. I'll hire lawyers, real ones. You're welcome to try, I said calmly. But every clause is airtight. Marcus made sure. There's no loophole, no angle. The shares are gone. Her face twisted, anger, fear, disbelief all tangled together. How could you do this to me? After everything I gave you? I set my coffee cup down slowly. Tell me what you gave me. Name one sacrifice. Name one moment you chose me over image, status, or comfort. She opened her mouth, then closed it. Silence settled like dust. You used to love me, she said, voice suddenly small, trembling at the edges. I did, I whispered. And then you stopped loving the man I am, and started loving the life he built. Tears finally appeared, not grief, but panic. What am I supposed to tell people? The truth, I said. Tell them you didn't want a husband with dusty work boots and sentiment. Tell them you treated him like an embarrassment. Tell them you picked elegance over loyalty. Her voice hardened. I will ruin you. I'm already ruined, I said softly. A man doesn't sell his wife's share unless the marriage is already dead. She stared at me, breathing uneven. For a moment, I thought she might apologize, not because she meant it, but because she realized her life was slipping through her fingers. Instead, she grabbed her purse, wiped her tears, and walked to the door. This isn't over, she said. It is, I replied. You ended it the night you told a room full of people you were free. The door shut gently. No slam. No drama. Just quiet. Funny how marriages end like that, not with screaming, not with chaos. Just a soft click of a door that used to lead home. I sat alone again, but this time, something felt different. There was no ache, no fear, no desperation. Just a steady calm. The kind a man feels when he realizes he finally stopped begging to be seen. The aftermath came faster than I expected. 2 days later, I stopped by the office to pick up some year-end reports. The receptionist looked at me strangely, half curious, half sympathetic. As I walked through the hallway, whispers followed behind like shadows. Doors suddenly closed. Conversations paused. Something was in the air. I found out why when I opened my email. My inbox was flooded, employees sending, "Are you okay? Is it true? Please tell us this is just a rumor." A rumor had grown teeth. Apparently, my wife had started calling people, friends, relatives, even a few board members, telling them I'd sold her shares in an act of emotional revenge. She left out what led to it. Left out Christmas. Left out the humiliation. Left out years of being treated like a relic she outgrew. In her version, she was the victim. In her version, I was the cruel, vengeful husband. The story spread fast. Wealthy circles are tight and vicious. By noon, a blogger posted something vague about a prominent business figure sabotaging his spouse. By evening, a local newspaper printed a small piece hinting at a messy financial dispute. No names, but it didn't need names. People love gossip more than facts. The next morning, she showed up at the office building. Dressed perfectly, makeup flawless, smile stiff as polished glass. She greeted employees like a politician working a room. When she spotted me, she lifted her chin and crossed her arms. "We're discussing this in your office," she said. "No," I replied. "We're not discussing anything here." Her smile disappeared. "You embarrassed me publicly. You owe me an explanation." "I owe you nothing." She exhaled sharply through her nose, trying to regain control. "Fine. Then come outside. Now." We walked to the private courtyard behind the building. Snow covered the benches, untouched and silent. Her heels sank into the powder as she turned to face me. "You've poisoned my reputation," she said. "People are siding with you because they think I'm some gold-digging trader." I didn't flinch. "Did you tell them why I sold the shares?" "That's private," she snapped. "Convenient. You want pity without the truth." Her eyes darted away, then back. "You should have talked to me before doing something drastic. We could have figured it out." I was angry, I said things I didn't mean. She finally reached for remorse, but it was too late, and we both knew it. "You weren't angry," I said. "You were comfortable. Comfort makes people honest." She stared at me a long time before whispering, "You turned this into a spectacle." "No," I said. "You did. The moment you told people you were better off without me." She looked as if she might crumble, knees unsteady, voice thin. "I don't have access to anything now. No profits. No security. You left me with nothing." "You left me with nothing years ago," I replied. "Affection, respect, loyalty, gone long before you felt the consequences." Her shoulders dropped. The fight drained from her. For the first time, she looked small. Lost. "I don't know who I am without this life," she whispered. "That's the saddest part," I said. "Your identity came from what I built, not who you are." A bitter wind swept across the courtyard, rustling dead leaves frozen beneath the snow. She wrapped her coat tighter, but it wasn't the cold that made her shiver. "What happens now?" she asked. "You live the life you wanted," I said. "Independent. Elegant. Free of the man who embarrassed you." She didn't argue. She didn't apologize. She just looked at me with the hollow expression of someone realizing she'd stepped off a cliff and only now noticed the ground was gone. When she left the courtyard, her steps were slower. Not defeated, just stripped of illusion. Over the next week, silence replaced gossip. The news cycle moved on. People grew bored. And without her access to company profits, her social circle shrank fast. Friends who once invited her to champagne brunches stopped calling. Fancy dinners went quiet. The world she'd chased didn't need her anymore without the status she once held. Meanwhile, the company stayed steady. My employees respected me. My partners didn't flinch. Business moved forward as if the storm had never happened. But something inside me had changed. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't humiliated. I wasn't wounded. I was done. And the peace that followed wasn't loud or triumphant. It was simple. For the first time in years, I felt like a man who chose himself. After the fallout settled, the world became strangely quiet. No more late-night arguments. No more apologies that never meant anything. No more pretending we were still a team. She moved out 2 weeks later. No goodbyes, no final speeches. She packed designer clothes into suitcases I paid for, walked down the driveway without looking back, and drove off in the car the company leased in her name. The house echoed behind her, big, hollow, and finally honest. I spent the first few nights wandering from room to room like a man examining the ruins of a life. Every picture frame, every chair, every holiday decoration reminded me of how long I held together something that was already broken. Loneliness is a strange thing. It doesn't rush in, it seeps. At breakfast, there was no second cup of coffee on the counter. At night, no voice upstairs, no footsteps. The bed stayed cold on her side. But grief didn't consume me. Something else did, clarity. For years, I defined home as a place where she was. I defined marriage as a commitment to stay, even when staying hurt. I defined love as sacrifice. I gave until I was empty. She took until she didn't need me. Now, the silence taught me something unexpected: peace doesn't need an audience. I filled my days differently. I visited the workshop behind the house, where dust-covered machines waited for hands that still remembered how to build things. I spent hours sanding old wood, shaping it into something new, letting the work quiet my mind. On Sundays, I ate breakfast at a small diner downtown. The waitress, a woman with silver hair and kind eyes, learned my name. She always brought extra napkins because she said older men hated greasy fingers. We talked about nothing important: weather, books, the price of eggs. Ordinary conversation felt like medicine after years of walking on eggshells. I reconnected with friends I had neglected. Men who retired from the trades. Veterans with stories that went on too long but mattered anyway. We sat on porches, drank coffee, and laughed like teenagers who knew life still had room to surprise us. Some nights, I sat on the couch with a fire burning low, reading the novels I'd set aside for decades. The silence wasn't cold anymore. It was mine. One morning, as I was loading groceries into my truck, my neighbor, widowed 5 years, walked over with a plate of cookies. She said she heard my wife left. She said she was sorry. She didn't ask questions. Just offered kindness without strings. I realized then, not every woman would treat me like a burden. Not every room needed to feel tense. Not every holiday had to be survived instead of enjoyed. The house changed slowly. I boxed up the expensive decorations that never felt like us and replaced them with simple things: wood carvings, handmade candles, a small ceramic angel my daughter painted when she was 10. Items with soul, not price tags. Life didn't become perfect. But it became honest. And honesty, I learned, is a better companion than a wife who sees you as an inconvenience. One night, while watching the embers fade in the fireplace, I thought about the future, something I hadn't done in years. The company was stable. My health was decent. My hands still knew how to build. There was time left to make a life that wasn't defined by someone else's expectations. She wanted Christmas without me. What she never realized was that I needed life without her. Spring arrived before I realized winter had ended. Snow melted into the earth, the air softened, and the world began to grow again. I didn't rush anything. Healing isn't loud, it's quiet, like grass pushing through frost. I hadn't spoken to my wife in months. The silence wasn't punishment. It was peace. Then, one afternoon, as I was sanding a cedar board on the porch, a car rolled into the driveway. Her car. She stepped out slower than usual. No heels. No jewelry. No perfect makeup. Just a plain sweater, jeans, and a face that looked older than the last time I saw her. I didn't move. I kept sanding, letting the grain soak in the last coat of oil. "Richard," she said softly. I looked up. "You need something?" She swallowed. "I don't know where else to go." Not a grand apology. Not a speech. Just a confession carved out of exhaustion. "Come inside," I said. In the kitchen, she sat across from me at the table where we once planned our future. Her hands shook slightly as she wrapped them around a mug of coffee. For a while, neither of us spoke. Finally she said, "Everything fell apart. After the sale, people stopped answering my calls. The friends I thought I had disappeared." I nodded. I had expected as much. Social circles built on status vanish when the status does. She looked up with wet eyes. "Did you ever love me?" It should have been an easy answer. Instead, I felt the weight of 40 years press against my chest. "Yes," I said. "More than you ever understood." She blinked, tears falling quietly. "I don't know why I treated you the way I did. I got caught up in things that don't matter." "You forgot who we were," I said. "And who I was." She took a shaky breath. "I'm not asking for the company back. I'm not asking for money. I'm just asking for a chance to make things right." Her voice wasn't polished anymore. It cracked in places where pride used to live. I studied her face, the lines of stress, the hollow eyes. Life had humbled her far more than I ever could have. And in that moment, I realized revenge wasn't the ending. It was the beginning of truth. "I don't hate you," I said. "I never did." She closed her eyes, relief breaking her posture. "But we can't go back," I continued. "Who we were is gone. And we both know it." She nodded slowly. "I understand." Silence settled again. Not hostile, human. "I can help you get back on your feet," I said. "Not as a husband. As someone who once loved you deeply." Her shoulders shook once, quietly. "Thank you." In the weeks that followed, I found her a small apartment across town. Nothing fancy, but safe. I paid 3 months' rent, stocked the fridge, made sure she had what she needed to stand without leaning on me. She tried to refuse. I insisted. Not out of guilt, out of closure. We didn't rekindle romance. There were no dramatic reunions or tears under moonlight. Just honesty, finally, without the costumes. The company thrived. I donated a portion of profits to a local trade school, kids who needed a chance the way I once did. I spent mornings helping teach woodworking classes. Younger men with rough edges and rougher stories. They respected my hands and the decades carved into them. On Sundays, I had dinner with friends. Real friends. The kind who didn't care about bank accounts or status. Just laughter, good food, and seats pulled out without hesitation. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, my wife, now simply a person from my past, would send a text wishing me well. No begging. No manipulation. Just gratitude. She found a small job at a florist shop. It gave her purpose. Humility looks different on people who never expected to wear it. One morning, as I was locking up the workshop, my neighbor called out, "Big plans today?" I smiled. Not big. Just good. That was enough. Redemption wasn't dramatic. It was simple, honest, and human. I didn't fix the marriage. I fixed myself. And for the first time in decades, I realized I wasn't the man she pushed out of Christmas. I was the man who finally let himself in. People ask me if I regret what I did. Selling her shares. Letting the marriage die. Walking away from 40 years of history. The truth is simple. Regret belongs to men who stay silent while they disappear. I spent decades believing love meant endurance. That if I worked harder, provided more, swallowed every insult, the woman I married would return. But sometimes love doesn't die in a single moment, it erodes, grain by grain, until a stranger stands where a partner once lived. When she told me not to come for Christmas, she didn't just exclude me from a holiday. She showed me exactly where I stood in her life. On the outside. Unwelcome. Embarrassing. And if a husband has to beg for a seat at his own family's table, he isn't a husband anymore, he's furniture. So I stopped being furniture. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I didn't chase her. I used the only language she ever respected, consequences. Love without respect is charity. Marriage without loyalty is puppetry. And a man without dignity is already dead. By selling her shares, I gave her what she wanted, a life without me. And I gave myself something I'd forgotten I was allowed to have, peace. Now, Christmas looks different. No glittering crowd. No forced conversations. Just a quiet house, a warm fire, a cup of coffee, and the understanding that I survived something that was slowly killing me. If you've listened this far, thank you. And if you enjoy real stories where love meets truth and consequences finally speak louder than apologies, subscribe. Because there are more stories like this, stories where loyalty is tested, where dignity is reclaimed, and where people learn that respect is the real currency of family. And that's a debt no one should ever leave unpaid.